Howdy folks, welcome back to Woody's Power Barn. Today we got a 1957 Farmall 450 and it is sick, and I mean she's bad. This is a friend of mine's tractor. He bought it not running. It's really nice. The tin work, the hoods are really straight, really nice. Somebody's repainted it at one time and then it sat for about five to 7 years, somewhere in there. And it never ran. He bought it not running under that condition. We pulled it into his garage. He kind of tinkered around with it a little bit, and then we realized that it's just not running right. It runs exactly how you heard it when I was pulling it in here. So he called me up and we found some problems. So basically, long story short, it's got a hole burned in number 4 piston. There's no compression on it. And why exactly, I'm not sure. I think there were some spark plug wires that got flipped around at one point or another, and it probably missed for a really long time, and then pre-detonation burned a hole in the piston. That's the only reasonable explanation I can think of. So it is a nice tractor. He really wants to keep this thing for a long time. So we decided he decided that he's going to overhaul it. And he asked me if I would overhaul it. And I said, well, I love old tractors and I love more work. So of course, I'll definitely work on it. So we got it in shop here, 0 brakes. I thought I was going to roll it right into the front wall of my garage, which was not fun. I had about everything I had stepping on them 2 brake pedals to try to get it to stop, and then I thought I could, put it in first gear and roll it backwards, and if it got away, I'd just dump the clutch. Well, when it was in gear, it wouldn't roll backwards, even with the torque ahead. So, don't know exactly what's going on there, but maybe might look into the brakes a little bit. I don't know. I don't know how much time he wants to stick into this, because he likes working on this stuff himself, but he's just not, he doesn't feel comfortable overhauling the engine. So I have no problem doing that. So we'll go ahead, we'll get these sheet metal tin off, and see what we got cooking underneath there. Okay, so what we have here, I believe, is a C281 Farmall or International Harvester engine. They were about 51 horsepower in a 450. In the gas, they also made a diesel of these. The diesels are weird. The diesels start on gas and then they switch over to diesel. They kind of had a lot of problems cracking heads. They're not. I mean, they're sought after by people who want a lot of headaches, more or less. You can see that. I think we got a carb problem, which probably didn't help the way it ran. But I'm gonna get the oil draining, get the coolant draining, and kind of leave that to drip out, you know, get as much out as we can. While that's draining, I was gonna pop this air cleaner off of here, get this tube out of the way, and then we're gonna have to remove, this is the power steering pump that helps you steer your front wheels. Steering shaft, this is all gonna have to come off because, you know, we're gonna have to pull the head out of this thing. And then over here, this side's pretty basic. This side looks just like a Super M, H, anything like that. These are your hydraulic lines. This is your live hydraulic pump that runs off of the distributor gear. So when you push clutch in, you still have hydraulics. On the older stuff, right where this thing here is, it was called a belly pump way back yonder when. And when you push clutch in, you lose all hydraulics and PTO. This has live PTO as well. This side, yeah, pretty basic. The one thing that's weird is this is a 6-volt generator. It has a 12-volt battery, and it has the resistor for the 6-volt coil. So somebody's put a 12-volt battery in it and said, yeah, I converted it to 12-volt, but they never swapped the generator over so it's not charging at 12 volts. So that's something they'll definitely have to check. Some guys did convert these and make them 12-volt chargeable. It was really expensive, but it kept the factory look to everything. So I highly doubt that this has happened because it looks like this is never, it looks like it's been in this spot forever. So we'll get all that stuff taken care of and then we'll catch back up. Steering shaft is out, air cleaner's off, blah blah blah. On this upper steering shaft, so these are kind of different. There's this big plug on the front. Up in here, it's a gear. It's cut in half about right here, and it's got teeth on one side. And then on the end of the shaft is a worm gear. So when you spin that, it turns your front end. They were kind of problematic. They get wore out, and then going down the road, your tires would do this, and it wasn't good. It was kind of dangerous, but it worked in the day. It's full of a really thick oil, literally like molasses in January. So yeah, you pull this plug out, loosen all your joints up and everything, and then you just turn the wheel, and it basically just screws itself right out. Pretty easy to do that. Yeah, power steering pump is off. So now we got full access to the top of this. I think next, I got the battery unhooked. We'll go ahead and pull this generator off. I'm gonna pull the carburetor off and throw that on the bench. It obviously, something's wrong with it. It needs to be gone through. Probably pull the exhaust manifold off just to lighten the load. Thermostat housing, upper radiator hose. I'm probably gonna end up putting new hoses on this thing just because they're really old and they're getting dry rotted. And then once that's off, we'll pop the top cover off and start tearing the actual engine part down, get the head off. And then after that, get to the oil pan. Okay, here we go. Alright, all that's off. We did have a casualty though, sadly. This hose, steel tube, this goes right here. This feeds oil to the top of your governor that runs how much fuel is determined by, you know, speed of the engine, slows it down, magic, everything else. The end of that broke off. It is very rusty inside, and you can see the little shiny spot. That was the last spot it was connected. All that other dirty stuff, it's been broke for a long time. So I'll have to see if I can get a new one of these, a good used one, or if there's an alternative that I can booger something together to make it work. So let's see if we can get the valve cover off here. Now underneath here, there should be a copper washer, and that's what seals this stud up. Looks like somebody threw that away and just used some window caulk on there, so that's good. Hopefully our overhaul kit has those copper washers in it. Should, but you never know. Okay, there's our valve train. It's fairly clean up there. So we'll get these rocker shafts off, and then the head bolts, and then we'll jerk the head off. Okay. Okay guys, let's see if we can get this head lifted off here. I do notice we have a stuck valve. Didn't really know about that, so hopefully we don't have to do too much head work to this. Yeah, that's not good. Let me bring you guys in a little closer and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. bring it in here. That's our piston there. There's a lot of not good stuff. All sludge. She hasn't been maintained very well in her life, but we'll right that wrong. Okay guys, so now the pan's off. You probably can't see this very well. These are our rod caps that we got to take off. Hey.
Hi.
There's a steel washer that's bent over on the flat side of these bolts. That's to help prevent them from backing out. So we got to bend these off, loosen the bolts, pull the rod caps down, and then the pistons should push out the top. So we got to do that with all 4 of them, and then get a liner puller and pull all the liners out.
They are back.
I figured.
The truck wagon, just go.
But I do it with my rag.
Okay, go up now. There we have it, all 4 pistons out. Now we can work on the liners. Alright, I took all the head studs out and I set my sleeve puller up. I actually started pulling this sleeve. I had a previous video, I overhauled a Farmall H and I explained how I use this thing. Go check it out if you haven't. I'll go over it again, I'll explain how I used it. It'll be way easier for me to show you how it's done when I have all the liners out on the bench. It's just easier to see the tool, and it's so dark inside the engine I have a really tough time trying to film that and get it up there. So I'm going to get these liners pulled out and then show you how the tool works, and then it's time to start. Alright, so here's our liner puller. Piece of long threaded rod, a nut, a bearing, a T, whatever you want to call it, and then nut, 2 spacers, and a nut. Technically, you'd only need 1 spacer, and I'll tell you why. So, you know, the block is all the way around this. This is the liner. Feed that down through, and then these washers on the end, they're just smaller than the OD of this liner. So you center it up. That's the second washer, helps to center it. This isn't the right one for this bore. The outside one is, but the inside one's not. That should fit snugly on the inside, and then this outside one is just smaller than the OD of the liner itself. So then you just pull the tool in, and you can start threading on this. You saw I had the two steel blocks that rest on the block. Pull this down, it pulls that rod up, which pulls your liner out. Works really well on stuck liners. This engine, they came out phenomenally well. Very impressed by that. Sometimes a lot of guys on the inside will run a bead of weld, and when that cools, it'll shrink, and then they'll basically just fall out. But it's kind of a lot of mess around. This is a tool my grandpa made. I kind of like using it whenever I get the chance. So yeah, the other benefit of having 2 washers down here is that it limits how much deflection this washer has down here, because it's not a very thick or big washer. Well, when you put one in here, well, then now your only deflection is going to be on this outside, this 1/4 inch 3/8 ledge on this outside, instead of, you know, the 2 inch ledge before. So now that we got those all cleaned up, well, not cleaned up, but out, then now we can start cleaning up the deck. I wrap paper towels around the crankshaft. It's always a very good practice to do. It keeps the dirt out of your oil galley holes, B, protects the rod journals from scratches if you drop anything or anything like that. So I'm going to use my tried and true method. I'm going to use my super scraper all along the top of it first, and then I'm going to go along with the wire brush. I'm probably just going to do this one wire brush by hand, and then take some Scotch-Brite and some solvent and just clean it up. No air tools, no nothing like that. Just hand done labor. Get these cleaned up in here. That's the counter bore for the liners. Start with cleaning all of this top deck up, inspect everything, make sure we have no cracks, nothing visibly bad. We'll start there, and then we'll keep moving on down the road. What's up, guys? Welcome back. Today is another day. Kind of got a little busy when we were working on it before, but we're ready to pick it back up. So the last thing you guys saw, I think, we got all the liners pulled out. Yep, I'm pretty sure that was the last part. Got all the liners pulled out, scrubbed the deck down. Now, what I'd really like to do today, or tonight, I want to wash this whole block down. All I have is brake clean. I kind of like to use a solvent sprayer, but right now all I have is brake clean, which will work just fine. So what I want to do is I want to spray everything down. I want to spray in the bolt holes. Some of these holes, I believe this one, that one, this one, and this one, they go into the cooling passages. I don't want to load that up with brake clean, but I do want to get it cleaned out. Main reason for doing this is after we scrubbed all this down, we want to wash all that dirt, debris, everything, get it out of the block. And then I want to roll the main bearings in tonight. That's my goal. Whether that happens or not totally sure. But we're going to give it our best shot. So I'm going to wash this thing down with brake clean. And then there's a cover down here. Right under here. Let me get my light out. wherever that stud is sticking out, that's a cover that's bolted on with these rear bolts. It's also access. I believe this has a felt rear main seal. We're gonna try to replace that. We have to take that cover off anyway because that's where our number 3 main bearing cap is. That's number 2, and that's number 1 right there. So we want to get all of the dirt and debris out of the block before we put any new parts in this thing. Also, what that helps do is push any dirt that may have fallen onto those main bearing journals away from the block. So I'm gonna mask up, spray this thing down, dry it off with some compressed air, and roll mains in. Here we go. Alright guys, you got the engine all cleaned up. We're going to start on number 2 main cap here. I only like to do one at a time, mainly so the crank doesn't hang and ruin the front or rear main seals. And I'm going to do number 2 because it's easiest to show. Main bearings are not hard to do, they're actually fairly simple. I've already taken the liberty and broke the bolts loose on this one. One main thing is that you really want to pay attention to the direction that it goes in. You do not want to screw that up. Some main caps have dowels, so you can't screw it up. A lot of times both tabs go on the same side, but not all the time. This one, in the casting of this main cab, there's an X, and that faces the left-hand side of the tractor, or left-hand side of the engine. So I'm going to remember that and get these bolts pulled out of here. That one's really gooey. And I stick both bolts in and use them as kind of a wedge and just rock it back and forth until it comes out. And there's our main bearing. On this particular engine, this center bearing, let me see if I can pop this thing out of here. You'll notice the center bearing has these sides on it. These are actually your thrust washers. It's built into the bearing on this engine. That's what maintains your end play, or your frontwards and backwards movement of the crankshaft. It has to be able to move front and back. You know, that lubricates everything in there. Too much is bad, too little is bad, you know. So these are your preset, and that determines a good amount of end play for your engine. So we got the lower out, and then what I like to do is take a hammer and a dulled flathead screwdriver, our bearing tab is on this side, so we're going to want to roll this bearing out opposite of that tab, otherwise the tab won't allow it to roll in the other way. So we're just going to lightly tap. I said lightly tap. Well, there goes the light. Come on. There we go. And just slowly roll that out. Now we got it kind of going.
you can get enough grip on it. I can't here. I'm gonna get a thinner screwdriver. All right, there we have it. Let me fish the rest of my screwdriver out of here. There it goes. So there's our upper bearing. These bearings actually don't look too bad. They're a little pitted up, but what do we got here? Yeah. On the back side of the bearing, you're not gonna be able to see it, even if I hold the camera close. It is stamped standard, which is a good sign. More than likely, this engine has never been overhauled. Somebody's been in here for one reason or another, but the fact that it still has standard bearings it's a fairly good indicator that this engine has not been overhauled yet. So the crank looks good. We have no scratches, no deep grooves. There's no bearing material transfer. The bearings, they're worn, but they look really good for the age and the shape of the rest of the engine. These look very good. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to just spray a little brake clean around this, clean this up really good, take a rag, wipe it down, and then just put a light film of oil only on the crankshaft side of the bearing, and on these just a little dribble of oil on these thrust washer sides of the bearing that face the crankshaft, and roll this thing back in, clean the main cap up, and then bolt that back on and torque it to factory spec. Alright guys, that's how you do a main bearing. I'm going to go ahead and knock these other two out. I'll show you what I'm talking about this two-piece felt rear seal, if it has it. Not really sure. I've always done H's and M's. This is the first 450 I've done. Really the exact same concept. But they did make minor changes between the years, between the letter series and the number series. So I'm going to knock these out and I'll bring you guys back. Okay, so I got the number 3 main bearing changed, and if you can see right up in this area, that's where our main rear main seal is going to be. So this one actually has a one-piece, just like a regular lip style seal. It does not have the felt in it. So we're not going to change that. Up in there, there's this piece that kind of goes in like that, and then there is this piece that kind of covers everything up in there. So you got to take both of them off to gain access to that main bearing. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this back together. Well guys, I think that's where we're going to end this one tonight. Pick her back up tomorrow. Hopefully get the liners in, assemble the rods and pistons, get those slammed in, maybe start working on the head. Okay. Howdy folks, welcome back. It's the next day. Getting a little bit of a better head start on this. Pretty sure last time we left off and I got all the main bearings rolled in and we kind of talked about the rear main seal a little bit. So now tonight, my plan is I want to get all 4 of these piston and rod assemblies disassembled, and I have my new parts laid out here ready to assemble. These are Reliance parts. I try to leave them whatever came in a package, so the rings, liner, and there's a piston and piston pin inside of here. That all comes in a box. The rod bearing comes in a separate box.
I like to lay everything out, and I do it in the orientation of the tractor. The front end of the tractor is this way, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Just like the pistons over here, 1, 2, 3, 4. You really don't want to mix up the rod caps, and on an overhaul like this, I much prefer to keep number 1 rod on number 1 throw on the crankshaft. So go ahead, get these stripped down and wash the rods up, and then start assembling over here. All right, here we go. Okay, we'll just do a quick rundown on getting one of these disassembled. So these have a clip similar to what you would see in a U-joint of a drive shaft. Pretty basic, pretty simple. Just take a pair of pliers, you're gonna squeeze that and get it out of there. And then small finger, just kind of pull that out of there. There's our rod, and I put the bolts and everything back in here just to make sure nothing would get mixed up or confused. Get those unscrewed, and then to pop the rod bearings out, if they're a little stuck and you can't get them on the bearing tab slot, if you have a thinner screwdriver than I have, you can get them out, or roll them out. Do whatever works, I guess. Oh man. So there you have it. That's one rod disassembled. One thing you want to look for is look in this wrist pin bushing in the top of the rod. Quick, easy way to tell is take your old wrist pin and just kind of rock it. Feel for any excessive movement. A little bit, you're going to have a little bit. Just your tolerances. I mean, these things aren't built to a 1,000th tolerance. They're probably built more like 5, 6. So this one feels really good. We get new wrist pins. These pins are really, really hard. They make pretty decent spacers as long as you don't have to cut them, because they can be very hard. So that feels good. I'll probably end up just put this one lightly back together, disassemble all these, and then I can take them all over and wash them in my tote of solvent. All right, let's get these things ripped apart. All right, all the rods are over here. They're all cleaned up. We're gonna go ahead and assemble our new pistons. Right here I took out of the number 1 slot, and I laid my rings out on the table here. In the packaging, they make it pretty easy. They label it first ring, second ring, third ring, and fourth ring. That's counting from the top of the piston down. So top would be first, bottom would be fourth. Also, on the rings, they label the top side up. This one is labeled up 2. So that's how you know that's a second ring, and up is up towards the top of the piston crown. They make it fairly hard to screw up. The first ring is a double beveled ring. There is no top. Both sides are perfectly symmetrical, so it really doesn't matter which way it goes on. I do not have a ring expander here. These smaller pistons, you really don't need one. It helps, tremendously helps. It's kind of hard on your fingers if you don't have one, but we're going to make do here anyway. I prefer to start at the bottom. I think everybody pretty much can agree with that. The bottom is our oil control ring. There's 3 pieces to this ring. We have our top and bottoms, and then we have our scraper. This scrapes the oil off of the liners as the piston travels up and down. So I'm going to go ahead and get this first ring on here. Take your time doing this. There's absolutely no need to rush anything here. Okay, there's our first ring in place. Now the gap for that, we're going to kind of want to make a mental note of that. We want the gap of our scraper opposite. So we're going to fold this open, get it around there. Alright, I did that wrong. You have to put the scraper in first. There's a groove on the inside of it that only allows it to go in one way. We're learning here. So, let's try it again. Put our scraper in, then we'll bring our ring and get that around that scraper. Just like that. Everything still moves in there. That should work. So now we'll take our second one. We'll slowly work this puppy down there. Just like that there. I'm going to offset those just a little bit, just so none of the ring gaps are in line with each other. That's kind of our main goal here. Okay. That is our oil ring installed. So now, go ahead and grab our third ring out of our package. This is labeled up 3. So we're going to start working this one on there. Just like that. So on to the second ring. There's that one. Okay. Now we have all 4 of our rings installed. I'm not going to worry about clocking these just yet. I'll wait more for that until we get ready to install these in the engine. So the next thing we want to do is we're going to remove one of our snap rings, just like we're disassembling them. Pull our pin out. And this is kind of a thing of mine. So the gap of this ring is actually facing down. I want that gap up top. My reason being, when the piston is on its power stroke, all the force is coming down. I feel like there would be a greater chance of it being able to break that with a gap on the bottom, because all your force is being applied downwards. I don't know. That's what Caterpillar says. I work for Cat. Caterpillar says face the gaps up. So they have way more experience in engineering than I do. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this just so that faces upwards. Grab my oil bottle. I'm going to lube up this wrist pin. And then I'm going to lube up our wrist pin bushing in the piston rod. Then I'm also going to put a little bit of oil in the crown itself. So these pistons are stamped front on them. So we're going to imagine that this is in the engine. So I'm going to lay this piston down so front is facing to the front of the tractor. Typically, but not always, on your connecting rods, part numbers face the front of the engine. So, being the tractor's facing this way, I want my part number facing that way on these. I also know because the rods face the left side of the engine. So, or the rod opening face the left side of the engine. So we're going to want to insert it like that, just so we have our orientation correct. Drop our wrist pin back in. And secure everything together with a snap ring. So that's one piston and rod assembly complete. I'm going to go ahead, get the other three banged out, and then we'll catch you guys back up to speed. Rod's done. Liner's next. Spread a little brake clean on a rag. Wipe the liners down. Make sure there's no oil or anything on there. In a previous video, I did put a very light bit of oil on these liners. I'm going to try to put these in dry to avoid any air pockets or anything like that, just so the heat transfers off this liner into the block, into the cooling system better. That being said, we'll try to drop them in these holes. Sometimes you gotta give them a little persuasion to get them to go in. Sometimes they just fall in. So we'll see which one this decides to do. Look at that. Gorgeous. All right, everything's laid out here. I did put the rod bearings in the caps. Pretty self-explanatory. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my oil can. I'm going to put some oil on that wrist pin, slide it back and forth, wiggle it around, make sure I get a bunch of oil worked into there. And then I'm going to oil the rod side of the rod bearing. As far as clocking the rings go, I'm going to tip this up and I'm going to put every ring so there's no gaps lined up. The main thing is the oil control ring on the wrist pin side on one end. So remember there was 3 rings, 1, 2, 3. These lower 2, put them about an inch, inch and a half apart, lined up with that wrist pin. And on the middle, the scraper, you want that lined up with the wrist pin as well. So 180 out on those. These top 3 rings, I would just put them basically so no gaps line up. If it was a 3-ring setup, 4-ring, it'd be slightly different. But this typically, I would probably go, you know, at say 0 degrees, 120 degrees, and 270. I don't know. Degrees are hard. I'm not a whatever who does degrees. And then once that's lined up, we'll throw a pretty generous amount of oil on these rings, the skirt of the piston. We'll come back over to the block. We'll oil down this liner, rub it in there with our hand so it's real nice and slippery like. And then this is my ring compressor. There's a little, you can see the dimples on the bottom here. That's to let it sit on top of the deck, and then this does not slide in the hole and the piston does. We'll put that around the piston and take the wrench here, turn it, and it'll tighten up around those rings, compressing the rings, letting us be able to let that piston drop into the hole. So I'm probably gonna set you guys up so you can watch me, because I need like 3 hands to do all this, and hopefully put all these in. Oh, another thing to remember, you want the crankshaft at the bottom of the stroke, not the top. Not the top, the bottom. That ensures that when you drop it down in, you're not gonna bang it on that crankshaft. And it's also easier to grab a hold of that rod, pull it, slide it on. You can put your rod cap on and torque it while it's all down at the bottom. Okay, let's go ahead and get this done. All right, folks. All the pistons are in. Put these bolts here to hold the liners down while I rolled it over a few times just to make sure everything spun free. So now I've gone ahead, I got the oil pan cleaned up. Here's the cork gasket for that. And then underneath here, I wiped everything down, cleaned the pan rails of the block. So what I'm gonna do is there's joints where the front cover meets the block, and same thing with the rear, that piece we took out to do the rear main bearing. I'm just gonna wipe a little bit of silicone in there where that gasket sits to fill up that void. And then that should be it for the pan, and then the lower end should be all done. Okay, there we go. Let's get the pan on. Okay, folks, I think this is where we're going to leave this one. Rods and pistons are in. Oil pan is on. I cleaned up a little bit of my mess down here. Pretty good amount of work done for tonight. I think I'm going to call it a night. Okay, we'll see you guys probably tomorrow. Alright guys, after a ton of struggling, I finally got all the valves out. Number one, you can compare it to that one. I believe that is number one exhaust, is extremely rusty inside. That was our stuck valve. And then on number four, with a hole in the piston, we can see we have a lot of debris on our valve. The head looks good though. The seats on the head itself for number four, they don't look too bad. I think we should be able to clean that up. So what I'm going to attempt to do here is very carefully, I'm going to try to clean these valve heads up and get all the carbon and garbage off of them with a wire brush. And then I'm going to attempt to clean this guide out. Not totally sure I'm going to do that, but I'm going to try everything in my willpower to get that cleaned out. By rights, yeah, we should probably regrind the valves and seats, but we're going to see if we can make a run with what we got here. I think we can get it to run pretty good. It won't be perfect, it won't be 100%, but I think it'll be pretty good. So let me see what I can accomplish cleaning all this stuff up. Alright, I got all the valves cleaned up. They didn't turn out really amazing. There's some pits and rust in them. But I did lap in the valves on this hole just to see how they clean up, and I think they're going to clean up great. I think they're going to seal up. I don't think we're going to have any problems with them. So that stuck valve ended up, it's pretty crude. I had a punch that fit loosely in that hole, and then I just wrapped some 800 grit sandpaper around it, sprayed it down with penetrating oil, and just ran it in and out of that hole. Cleaned it up really nice. The valve slides in and out smoothly. I went ahead and lapped it. You can see the line that formed all the way around. Turned out nice. It slides up and down freely. Should seal up great. So the way I lap them is I don't clean anything because the lapping compound is a grit. You don't want that in there anyway. Basically, I just take a rag and I kind of wipe out the valve seat in the head, and I clean up the valve heads. And then I just have a little bit of lapping compound in a jar here. I just kind of dabble a little bit right on there. Kind of wipe it around with my finger just to somewhat evenly distribute it around that valve head. Now you don't want to get any on the stem because you don't want to mar up your valve guide. I'm going to slide that down in there. And here's a old-timey valve grinding tool. Just crank the handle, spins it around, and kind of does a wishy-washy motion. Get that stuck on there, and then just start grinding. You really don't want to apply too much pressure on this. You kind of just let the compound do its own work, and then you lift up every now and again. It almost sounds like when you're filling a glass of water out of a tap, that the different sound it makes the closer it gets to the top. When it sounds like the glass is getting full, you pull up and put it back down, and that kind of redistributes the valve lapping compound and allows it to keep grinding better. Check our progress here. Now, is this the perfect way to do this? No. But will it work? Hell yeah. I think this thing will seal up just fine. And just check the valve seat out. I don't see any cracks or pits that I think are gonna make us have a bad day. Our valve, we got a nice line all the way around. Again, I don't see anything that's super detrimental to this valve. Then we're gonna be good. So go ahead, finish the rest of all these valves, and then we'll Scotch braid up the deck. Same with the manifold, exhaust and intake manifold on the other side, thermostat gasket on the top. Scrape the valve cover gasket, clean that up, wash this down in solvent, wash all of our valves and springs in solvent, dry everything off, reassemble it, and then put it back on the engine. Okay, here we go. Alright guys, studs are in, head is done and cleaned. I got the head gasket set on here, so I'm going to go grab the head, get the head set down, and then torque all the bolts, or I guess nuts in this application. I'll probably do the nuts in 3 stages. I believe the end final torque is around 115, so I'm probably going to start around 50 and then probably go to 75, and then we'll torque them to a final 115 just to evenly seat everything. Start from the center, kind of work our way out. So I'm going to grab the head. Sometimes they don't always go down because these studs aren't exactly perfectly centered up, so it'll probably set on here and it won't go anywhere, and then I'm going to have to beat these studs around a little bit, wiggle them, try to get them to center up so the head will fall down, or it'll just work. Got a little bit of dirt off of there. Well, that was fast. Heads on. Okay folks, head is on. I got the thermostat housing on here. I reuse this upper hose and the lower ones because I don't have this size here, but I replaced this one. This is kind of hard to get one. This is our governor breather line. We did break that, taking it apart. Basically what I did is I cut this end off, got the old piece out of the broken end, and then cut another piece out of the section I cut off, put it in there, and then I just ran a piece of hose with 2 hose clamps to connect the two. It should work. I don't know if he's going to get a replacement or what he wants to do with that, but that'll keep it from leaking. Got the push tubes in and the rocker arms on. I did set all the valves. The best way I can explain to do this, I use the sister cylinder method. So on a 4-cylinder engine, you have sister cylinders. 1 and 4 are a pair, and 2 and 3 are a pair. The pistons move together. That also means they fire on the opposite crank stroke, because every piston fires. How am I trying to say it? With 2 rotations of the engine, every piston fires. So piston 1 would be firing. Piston 4 would be pushing exhaust gas out. So when piston 1 is firing, both valves are closed. Well, the way to know when they're fully closed is when both valves on number 4 are both tight. It's called scavenging. When the exhaust valve is coming up, the intake valve opens just a little bit, and what that does is the inlet air rush from the intake air actually pushes out exhaust gases. They call it scavenging. Every engine's done it since the beginning of time. So when both of these are tight, both of these need to be adjusted, so on and so forth. Roll the engine over twice, you should have all the valves done. The other easy way to do it, when one valve's down, the other one has to be open. So roll the engine over, one valve down, adjust that one, find any other ones that the valves are down on, adjust that. Okay, I'm gonna get the valve cover on, manifold. I'm basically gonna put the rest of the tractor together. You guys have already seen me take it apart. There's real no point in watching me put it back together. And then hopefully fire it up, make sure it runs. Okay, here we go. All right guys, tractor's all together, except for the sheet metal. Radiator's full of coolant. We got, I want to say about 2 gallons in the crankcase, maybe 2 gallons in a quart. That's full. New spark plug wires. The spark plugs that were in it were basically new. I did go through that carburetor. Had a lot of garbage and junk in it. Cleaned it out really good, blew it out, made sure it works. Didn't use any new gaskets or anything because I don't have any. So hopefully that works. That's why I left this intake pipe loose, just to make sure there's no fuel running out of it. So I think we can go ahead and try to fire this thing up. Well, there you have it, guys. She is a runner. And it runs very well, too. I kind of did tweak on the carburetor a little bit. I believe this is your low idle circuit. Tweaked on that just a little bit. When I took the carburetor apart, this was all the way in, bottomed out. So I backed it out 1.5 turns. I got it at about 3/4 turn, half turn right now. Messed with the fuel. I think this is your main fuel settings. Screwed it in a little bit because I noticed when he really gave her the beans, a bunch of black smoke came out. So that's just raw fuel. Turn that in just a little bit. Other than that, runs really well. It has the nice Farmall blubber blah, 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 to it. That's what makes the old rain capper go flippity flap. So yeah, super happy with how this turned out. It only has about a gallon of gas in the fuel tank. It's really, when he dropped it off, it was completely empty, and I couldn't figure out why I couldn't get it started. Lo and behold, first things first, dummy, check the oil. Check the oil, check the gas. So yeah, only about a gallon of gas, so I think tomorrow, I'm shot for the day, I'm done. I got the thing running, I got my goal done. So I think tomorrow I'm gonna go get about 5 gallons of fuel, so then I can drive this thing out, and I wanna power wash everything while the hoods are off, clean it up really nice, make it look nice and pretty, get all the hoods back on, wash the hoods, and then I think we're gonna be about done. I talked to him about a few little things. He said he's gonna look at the brakes, he'll take care of those. These power steering hoses, this red part should be up here, and it's down here. He's gonna take care of that, and a couple other little things. This radiator, you can see how it's damp right around here. Radiator's leaking. He's gonna take care of that as well. So basically I got a few things to button up on it, and we should be good to go. So yeah, super happy with today. Really glad I finally got it running. It's always kind of nerve-wracking to start one up after you overhaul it, because you never really know if it's gonna go or blow. So on that note, got a barley pop here. Gonna celebrate this small victory. And we'll be back at her tomorrow, get this thing washed up, and maybe take it for a spin. Okay, see you then. Well, folks, there you have it. She's all washed up, hoods are back on, everything cleaned up really nice. I was surprised this white, it really cleaned up a lot. I don't know, there was like black dust on it. It was weird, but that's all cleaned up and gone. Paint's actually in, the tin paint's actually in pretty decent condition. I think you throw a wax on there, it would look like new. I'm sure the lighting's not great with the sun right now, but you'll have to take my word for that. I have no idea what is going on down here. She sprayed water in there and all of a sudden oil just continues to run out. I don't know if there was a hole that was plugged with dirt and this whole casting is full of oil. I have no idea. So I'm gonna have to talk to him and see if he wants to pursue that one or take it as it is. The brakes, I actually got those working a lot better. I think they were rusted up. When I was driving it, I just stomped on the pedal and I think it cleaned a lot of that rust up. Got rid of that, so it does have brakes now. No, I think this thing will be good. There was no idle screw. So when you'd have it half throttle and you'd idle it down, it would actually kill because the tractor, I think the throttle butterfly would snap all the way shut and then vacuum would hold it shut. If you brought the throttle down slow, it would be okay. So put that stop screw in there. It was broke off, so I drilled it and tapped it and just stuck a regular screw, and I had an old spring laying around. That fixed that problem. Other than that, I think she's gonna be good to run. There was one small leak on this cylinder back here. I washed it all up so you can't really see it as much. But yeah, pretty happy with this one. Runs great, runs strong. I think it'll make him a really good tractor. All right. Well, guys, I want to thank everybody for watching. I think that's where I'm going to end this one. Got a lot of time in this. It's Sunday right now. Thinking about going in the house and watching a little football. So yeah, thanks for watching. Make sure to like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you would have done something different, or if I should have done something different, or if you saw something you like, just let me know. All right, guys, see you next time.